My parents kicked me out and chose my sister because of a missing bracelet. This changed everything after my grandparents died. My sister was always preferred by my parents, who once expelled me for having a lost bracelet. So when my grandmother gave me the family's money, my parents were very sad. I grew up in a normal suburban home with 2 parents and a younger sister. Most people would think this is a normal middle-class family. But people who knew us well would tell you that my parents and I and my parents were always arguing. The reason was simple. They usually didn't think about me, and they loved my younger sister Emma. But it wasn't always like that. I remember how much my parents loved Emma and me when we were young. They loved us very much, and there was a good reason for that. We were very clever and excellent at everything. Nothing seemed to separate us. During the golden age, we did the same things. We did gymnastics, art classes, and piano lessons, and our parents were equally pleased with us. There was no little favor for one of us over the other, and I never experienced. There was some tension, but when I started 6th grade, everything changed. There was only one test, and I received a poor grade. It was the first time I had ever received a poor grade, and it wasn't a very significant one, but it was enough for my parents to start seeing me differently. I could see that something had changed. When Emma got another perfect score, my mom didn't look at me the same way she looked at Emma. She was really proud of Emma, but not of me. All of a sudden, Emma was the one who could do no wrong and I was the weak link. Emma got top grades and my parents praised her a lot. They didn't praise me like that. They used to say that Emma was the perfect daughter, and I was the one who could do no wrong. I thought it was just a phase, but it wasn't. I felt like they were being too hard on me. They would blame me for any mistakes I made, no matter how small. But they would ignore Emma's mistakes or forgive them. They would say, "She's just having an off day. Why can't you be more like Emma?" I would ask myself over and over again. During my teenage years, I felt like Emma was the daughter my parents had always wanted. She was outgoing, smart, and popular. She was the homecoming queen and class president. On the other hand, I was shy. I often thought about how Emma was treated very differently to me. She was popular, intelligent, and well-liked. She was the homecoming queen and the class president. I was shy and introverted. I studied hard, stayed to myself, and did well in my own way. But this was never enough to compare to Emma. In high school, I eventually stopped trying. The differences in how we were treated had become very obvious. Emma always had her own car, brand new clothes, and all the attention. Our parents would spend hours with her when she needed help with her homework, making sure she understood everything. If I asked for help, they either ignored me and told me to solve the problem on my own, or it was too late in the evening. They had started to treat Emma like a princess and treat me like an adult. Emma had everything, but I quickly realized that if I wanted something, I would have to work for it. I tried to keep up my relationship with Emma, even though she was treated unfairly. She was my sister after all, and I loved her. But it became harder to ignore her growing sense of entitlement, knowing she could get away with anything. Emma was loved by more people than just my parents. She attracted attention from our friends, teachers, and even strangers. I was the background and she was the bright girl. I started to question. I was often asked whether people saw me as more than Emma's sister. This changed one summer after I left home to start a new life. I had just got a scholarship to a good college, and I was excited to leave home and start a new life. I thought that if I and my parents had more space, we might get along better. I thought they would miss me when I left. But I was wrong. Emma started dating Jake, the star quarterback from our high school football team. He was popular, good-looking, and from a rich family. My parents naturally loved him. They thought he was their son. I would cook fancy dinners to impress Jake, who was staying with us every weekend. They couldn't wait for Emma and Jake to get married, start a family, and have perfect grandchildren. I was working part-time to help pay for things my scholarship didn't cover. While I was struggling with my first semester of college, Emma and Jake's latest trips or Emma's grades were the only things I heard about when I returned home after breaks. No one asked about me or my situation. They would also say sarcastic things like, "Why can't you find someone like Jake?" What remained of our family dynamic was devastated by the charges that followed. I came home for a visit one weekend, when I was off from college, before Emma's new bracelet went missing. It was a gold charm bracelet that Jake had given her. Everything appeared to be as usual. Emma was upset, and it was costly. Jake and I were very close, but after the accusations we weren't the same. One weekend I came home from college for a visit. Before Emma's new gold charm bracelet vanished, everything seemed normal. Emma was upset and it was expensive. My parents looked everywhere for it. Emma thought maybe I had taken it, but I didn't. I thought she was joking at first, but the night before she said she saw me looking at the bracelet. I was in a state of complete panic. My parents searched the house everywhere for the bracelet. Emma thought maybe I had taken it. I thought she was joking at first, but the next day she said she had seen me looking at the bracelet and that I must have taken it because I was jealous. I was very angry. I had never thought about taking her bracelet. But my parents believed her without question. I said I hadn't taken it, but they wouldn't listen. They thought I had stolen it to get back at her. In fact, my father once said, "We always knew you were jealous of Emma." That was the most hurtful thing they had ever said to me. It felt like all the time I had spent trying to be a good daughter and get their approval had been wasted. They said they would leave the house unless I gave them the jewelry back. I couldn't believe it. They didn't believe me, even though I had my word and no evidence of my innocence. They had already made up their minds, so I left. I didn't turn around after packing my things and leaving the house. I cut all contact with them. I had no other option. I couldn't continue to live in A. I was treated like a criminal for no reason. I found a friend to stay with. I didn't talk to my parents again for years. Without my family's help, I struggled in the years that followed. I was left to do it all by myself. I struggled to make ends meet while I had a difficult time after that. I didn't talk to my parents again for years. I had to support myself and I didn't have much money. I had a difficult time finding a job and going to school at the same time. Some days I thought I would never get through it, but I did. After I finished school, I got a good job and I started to live my own life. Emma was doing well. She had a good job in a marketing company. She and Jake stayed together, and she had got the job with my father's help. Nothing appeared to have changed without me. They were still the ideal family that I didn't hear from my family for 5 years. My life had to be rebuilt from the ground up. My grandmother, my dad's mother specifically, was the only one. She was the only one who helped me or supported me. I was invited to my grandmother's Christmas dinner, which I didn't expect, that I was surprised. The only member of the family who had ever been fair to me was my grandmother. She never mentioned my parents or tried to get me to make. She never tried to get me to make amends with them, but she did occasionally send me a birthday card or text to check in after everything that had happened. I wasn't sure if I wanted to go when I received the invitation, but I had a gut feeling that I should. It was like entering a time capsule when I got to the supper, along with a few other family members. I wasn't sure about going to the dinner when I got the invitation, but I had a feeling I should. It was like stepping into the past when I got there, with a few other relatives. My parents, Emma, and even Jake were there. There was a clear tension in the air. Emma acted like nothing had happened between us, and my parents were not very welcoming. They seemed to expect me to forget the past and fit into their idea of a perfect family. I made it through the terrible night. Then my grandmother started giving out gifts. I didn't have any big expectations, but I was shocked when I opened the box and found a gold locket. This was a family relic that had been passed down through the years. The jewelry wasn't just any jewelry. This locket was. My grandparents were giving me the family heirloom directly, ignoring my parents and all the other grandchildren, including Emma, who had inherited it from her father. This was more than just custom. It implied that everything my grandparents had, including their home, land, and savings, would eventually belong to me. When my parents realized what had happened, I could see their faces go white with shock. Emma, who had always been the perfect child, sat silently. I could sense the tension in the room as my parents quickly changed their tone, trying to hide their amazement. Grinning, my parents quickly took me to one side after the strange rest of the meal. They felt sorry, as though a few kind words could make up for years of unfair treatment and neglect. They talked about Emma's upcoming wedding, and how they wanted me to be part of the family for her sake. But I knew they wanted money, not love. Our family always valued the heirloom, and they knew I would inherit it. Now that I had it, they cared for me. They weren't worried about repairing the relationship. They were concerned about their potential losses. My father even said they were prepared to forgive me for everything and begin anew. They seemed to have forgotten who had initially harmed them. Other family members also voiced their opinions, advising me to exercise common sense. No matter what had happened before, family is the most important thing, and I should contact them again. I could already hear the cliches like no one wants to be alone. Sharing is caring and blood is thicker than water. I was overthinking the situation because of all the pressure, even though I knew what I should and shouldn't do, and that they only liked me for what I had. I didn't want to rejoin the family, because their interest in me was only because they wanted something from me. I couldn't forgive them. What do you think I should do? If I did, I'd need some help. First update. When I got back to my flat after Christmas, I felt really stressed. I tried to avoid my parents and other family, but they wouldn't leave me alone. Emma wouldn't stop smiling at me like we were best friends, and my parents wouldn't stop looking at me like they felt bad. But I knew they were more interested in the family's money than in our relationship. Their actions made me want to keep my distance. The days that followed were spent thinking about things. I knew that I needed to talk to Grandma in the right way. The locket had useful uses as well as its special meaning. It meant that I would get the family's things, even though I hadn't been looking for this. I needed to understand what it meant. Now that I had it, I wasn't going to get involved with family money and tradition without knowing what it meant. I was still worried about talking about it. When I saw my grandmother, I asked her honestly what it all meant. After thanking her for giving me the relic, I wanted to be open and honest. I told her that if it meant bringing me back into the instability I had fought so hard to avoid, I didn't want the family's riches. Although they weren't my top concern, I promised her that I would use the assets sensibly if they came my way. Grandma patiently listened. Then she explained something to me that I didn't fully understand before. She had spent years watching the family and noticed that they were starting to get more and more distant from her, especially after the argument between my parents and me. She told me that she knew about the family problems and that she had seen how my parents and I didn't get on, especially after the argument I had with my parents. She knew I had been treated badly, especially by Emma and my parents. She even knew that Emma was always allowed to do what she wanted, while I had to work several jobs to pay for college. Grandma said she hadn't got involved for a long time because she thought people should be allowed to live their own lives. But she realized that she needed to give her money to the right person after seeing what had happened. I had been treated badly, but I had still created something for myself. Someone who wouldn't waste it or take it for granted. She chose me. Because of this, my name was on her will, which she had already made. I was amazed by her honesty. The heirloom was no longer the only thing to consider. Trust was an issue. Grandma trusted me to take care of everything, and I felt this was a big responsibility. She told me that this was about trusting the family. It was about trusting people in the family to look after it, not about getting something back for what I had been through. It felt strange to suddenly be in this situation, but it made me feel good to know that Grandma had seen what was true. All those years when she was forgotten. As a daughter, suddenly I didn't matter, but although this made a lot of things clearer, it also made things more complicated. The inheritance remained a threat, and I was certain that my parents and Emma would do all in their power to regain control. Now that they were aware of the consequences, they had no intention of letting it go lightly. Second update. Hi everyone on Reddit. When I return with an update, the situation has got worse. If you have been following along, you are aware of how chaotic my family situation is. I was mistaken to believe that returning to school would bring me any calm. I went back to my flat in the hopes of, after the Christmas drama where Emma and my parents basically begged for the family money, I tried to ignore my family's constant calls and texts by focusing on my work for a few days. But of course, this peace was short-lived. Not only did Emma and my parents keep sending texts, and the rest of my family did too. Suddenly, relatives who hadn't spoken to me in years felt they had to sort out the problem. They all said the same things. Don't let money tear you apart. Family is everything, and my favorite, you're being selfish. The fact that these relatives, the fact that they didn't know what was going on only made things worse. While Emma had it all and lived the ideal life, they weren't around when my parents disowned me or when I was poor and had to scrounge for food and rent while I was at college. They only cared about what they had heard from my parents, who were now neatly playing the victim. Playing the victim and not caring about the years of abuse. Their opinion was too much for me to handle. Things took a strange turn. I thought I could just ignore everything and focus on my work. But then Emma and my dad came to my apartment one afternoon. You got it right. They showed up at my house without my permission. Invitation. They seemed to have a purpose, which was to force me to apologize or something, but on their terms that I could hear my mother sobbing in the hallway as they banged on the door and called my name. That I felt shocked after several months of being with me. My friend looked scared. And I was at I didn't know what to do. My parents began begging me in front of my friend as soon as I opened the door. My mother was crying as she talked about how they couldn't let me go, and how we had to make things right as though I had done something wrong. My dad said that they were willing to forgive me for everything. Meanwhile, Emma, she was standing there pretending to be worried, but I could see straight through her. She was more concerned about what would happen if I didn't agree to split the inheritance than she was about making amends. They weren't listening to me when I tried to keep the topic quiet and told them that this wasn't the right. I was pretending to be worried, but I could see that she was more worried about what would happen if I didn't agree to split the inheritance than she was about making amends. They weren't listening to me when I tried to stop them talking about it and told me that this wasn't the right time or place for it. While my dad stayed in the doorway, refusing to leave, my mom virtually shoved past me in an attempt to enter the apartment. They kept interrupting me to talk about Emma's impending marriage and the necessity to restore the family's unity before that could happen. They tried to force me into. The time and place for it was unclear. While my dad stayed in the doorway, refusing to leave, my mom shoved past me to get into the apartment. They kept interrupting me to talk about Emma's upcoming wedding and how the family needed to get along before that could happen. They tried to force me to agree to give up some of the future inheritance, which, by the way, I hadn't even received yet. They made it seem like I was the one destroying the family, which was really embarrassing. My neighbors started to come out of their rooms to see what was going on. I did everything I could to keep it quiet, but the more they lingered, the louder they became. Emma stood there looking smug, as though she knew they would finally wear me down, while my mom was on her knees, pleading with me to forgive them. That I was stuck and didn't know what to do. They refused to leave when I told them to go. After what seemed like hours of begging, I finally had enough and phoned security. Luckily, security arrived quickly. At first, they asked my parents to leave politely, but they refused. Security had to step in and threaten to call the police if they didn't leave. It was a whole new level of embarrassment. Before my parents eventually gave in, that my mother told everyone that I was leaving home. Then Emma went one step farther. She told a number of my friends that I had left her and my parents. But she didn't tell them that my parents had disowned me for. I didn't do that. It made it seem like I was the bad guy. That I had to explain everything to some of my friends because they didn't understand that it was tiring, and I was shocked at how far Emma would go to look like the victim. I'm not sure what to do. I don't know what to do right now. That I'm trying to move on and haven't spoken to my parents since everything happened. But I can't help but watch over them because of how desperate they are. I feel like I'm being forced into a difficult situation where I have to give in to please everyone else. But I will never forget the way I'm trying to move on. But I haven't spoken to my parents since that happened. I feel like I have to watch over them because they're so desperate. I feel like I have to give in to everyone else, but I will never forget the way they treated me. I can't handle the pressure. I'm worried that this will never end and that I'll have to live with it forever. It seems like my family wants to pull me back into their mess. But right now I just want to focus on myself and my future. Third update. Greetings once more, Reddit users. Please wait for my next report. Things have got a lot worse since my last update. To be honest, I wasn't sure if I wanted to get involved with them again after everything that happened. I couldn't help but wonder what would stop them from turning on me again if it was so easy to do based on a story. What would be the point in me thinking that my parents wouldn't act the same way again if something else happened? When they have changed their mind so quickly in the past, supporting Emma and rejecting me, I would have to be careful around them all the time, wondering if they really liked me or just wanted to get something from me. I would want to put myself first and take a break from them for a while. Don't bring me back into their mess. Let them deal with it on their own. My parents also contacted me again after all this, but they spoke in a different tone. They stopped pressuring me and making me feel guilty. They even nearly said sorry, but I could see they weren't being sincere. They were trying to get the money to get me to agree to their terms. They were still thinking about money and trying to make things go well. They were more worried about how things looked and making sure they had enough money than about fixing our relationship, especially now that Emma's future wasn't as stable as they had thought it would be. To be honest, I haven't replied to them and I'm not sure I will, even if they come with an apology. I'm not ready to deal with that again because this whole thing has reminded me how horrible my family is not my priority right now. I am focusing on myself and creating a future that I choose. I don't want to be influenced by their lies or control. For now, Reddit, that's all I need to say. Thank you for your help and support. It's helped me see things more clearly, even though it's been hard. If you are watching, please subscribe and click on the notification bell to get more shocking real-life stories.